Hello everyone, welcome to Mind Wars Masterclass. My name is Chaitanya Sant. You see, when I was in school, we had a very strict teacher. She never smiled, always scolded at us and never allowed any fun in the class. And for some reason, me and my friends, we began to call her Hitler. Why? Why did we associate Hitler with a person who was always very strict, very angry and never allowed any fun? In this masterclass, we are going to learn about Hitler and his friends in Europe. In short, the topic for today's masterclass is dictatorship and the rise of dictators in the continent of Europe. Starting with, let's understand the concept of dictators and what does dictatorship mean. Essentially, dictatorship is a form of government characterized by absolute rule of one person. In simple words, one person dictates his terms in the entire nation, thus called as a dictator. And that one person can be a king, he can be a military general, or can be an influential political leader as well. Before going ahead and understanding who these dictators were and what their ideologies were, we'll have to have a look at what were the reasons for the rise of these dictators. See, the First World War ended in the year 1918-1919, which had resulted in massive loss of life, property and capital. The world hoped that we'll never witness such mass destruction ever again. So because the World War took place, some European countries tried experimenting with democracy. However, the drama of democracy did not last long and democracy was a horrible failure. This failure of democracy led to the rise of dictatorship in Europe. Before going ahead to dictators, let's understand in detail what were the reasons for the rise of these dictators. So today we'll be discussing about three dictators of three different countries. First, Russia or Soviet Union had a dictator by the name of Joseph Stalin. Then coming to Italy, where there was the rule of Benito Mussolini and of course the famous Adolf Hitler of Germany. The very basic reason as to why there was this rise of dictatorship was a very humiliating treaty that was signed at the end of the First World War called the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles held Germany responsible for the war and thus Germany had to pay massive war compensations and they had also to hand over their land to the victorious Allied nations. This was very humiliating and the Germans felt insulted. The destruction of the First World War had led to a massive economic crisis. People did not have funds, the bread earners in the family had lost their lives, and more importantly, banks had ran out of funds. So economic crisis was on an all-time high and people needed assurance that such a warlike situation will never take place ever again. And for this, the League of Nations was established immediately after the end of the First World War with the objectives of maintaining world peace and avoiding a warlike situation. However, the League of Nations was an absolute failure in controlling the warlike situations and the League of Nations was an entire futile exercise. Now that we know the circumstances that led to the rise of these dictators, let's understand these dictators in detail. The first one was Joseph Stalin of Russia. His importance is in the spread of communism in Eastern Europe. He spread communism to different countries and eventually Russia became the capital of a group of countries which had accepted communism known as the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union became so powerful under the rule of Joseph Stalin that at the end of the Second World War, two countries emerged as superpowers. One was the United States of America and the other was the Soviet Union. Coming to our next hero, the next dictator, and that is from Italy. I'll come to his name later because the reasons why he became the dictator are perhaps more important. The war ended in 1919, which as I mentioned led to a massive economic crisis. People had lost their jobs, banks did not have money and there was complete crisis because bread earners had also lost their lives. So now Italy tried a democratic experiment. However, this also was a miserable failure. 3 years after the First World War ended, the first elections were held and there were 6 coalition governments from 1919 to 1922 and all of them failed. These political parties could not come to a mutual consensus. So now it was realized that democracy definitely was not the solution to the problems of Italy. So what was the solution? The solution was one name, and that is Benito Mussolini. The failure of democracy resulted in the world witnessing the rise of Benito Mussolini. The son of a blacksmith, later became a teacher, later became a journalist, and in 1919 established the Fascist Party. The principles of fascism were simple. Nation is greater than its citizens. He and his Fascist Party also believed that democracy widens the gap between people and their progress. Thus, he realized that there was a need of one-man rule. In other words, dictatorship. He also had the power of oratory. He had brilliant oratory skills. He began to give wild assurances to people, and that is when he realized that people in Italy only wanted promises and someone who would give them a bright future. And that is exactly what he did. He also liked to be referred to as Il Duce, and that is the leader. He was responsible for the overall growth and development of Italy, and Italy now became a powerful nation ready to enter the Second World War and capture the entire continent of Europe. Mussolini believed in the very famous phrase that is, Italy must perish or expand. And expansion is what he did. He expanded, he entered the Second World War, and that's when he realized that for his intention of capturing Europe, he wanted a friend, a very powerful friend. And this friend of Benito Mussolini came in the country of Germany. Mussolini found his friend in the country of Germany. However, this friendship, also referred to as the horrible friendship, didn't last long. His friend had committed suicide at the year 1945 when the war had almost come to an end. And his country, that is Germany, had surrendered to the Allied nations. Mussolini realized now that Germany has surrendered, there's nothing that he can do. And unfortunately, in Italy, he was captured by the firing squad. He was hung upside down, pelted with stones, and his body was thrown into a gutter. The very glorious life of Benito Mussolini saw an extreme tragic end. However, he was responsible for the overall internal growth and development of Italy. Now that we have done speaking of Mussolini, I mentioned of his very good friend that was in the country of Germany. Let's move on to the most exciting dictator the world has ever seen, the man by the name of Adolf Hitler. So what was the reason for the rise of Adolf Hitler? The reason was similar, and that was the failure of a democratic experiment. At the end of the First World War, Germany again, like Italy, tried their experiments with democracy, and a government was established at Weimar, and thus it was called as the Weimar Republic. However, the Weimar Republic was an absolute failure because it agreed to everything at the Treaty of Versailles, which eventually resulted to again a complete economic collapse of the German economy. The failure of the Weimar government was fertile ground for one man to rise to power in Germany, a man by the name of Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was an Austrian by birth. Being a nationalist, he had joined the German military to fight in the First World War. However, young Adolf was extremely disappointed because his country had lost the war and more so was also humiliated by the victorious nations. Thus, he enrolled himself in the Nationalist Socialist Party, which eventually came to be known as the Nazi Party. And because of his skills, he became the leader of the Nazi Party and adopted swastika as the official symbol of the Nazi Party. He began to give wild assurances, and one fine day he began to march in Berlin. As a result of which, he was captured, he was arrested, and he was put in jail. He did not waste his time in jail. While he was in jail, he wrote his autobiography titled Mein Kampf, that is, My Struggle. After he was released, he realized that he had to capture Germany through elections. And that is when he put to power his skill, and that was his oratory skills. In the year 1932, Adolf Hitler contested for elections in the German parliament, also called the Reichstag. However, he did not win a majority and thus was in the opposition. However, luck was on his side as the elected political party could not do any good work. Thus, President Hindenburg invited Hitler to form a government. So now Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, and that is the head of the government. Few months later, under mysterious circumstances, President Hindenburg lost his life. So now Adolf Hitler assumed all power, declared Germany to be a dictatorial nation, and declared himself the dictator of Germany. As soon as he came into power, again he began to give wild assurances, and all the promises that he had made, he now began to fulfill them. The first thing that he said was, the Versailles Treaty is a scrap roll of paper, the Versailles Treaty. And thus he decided that we are not going to follow anything mentioned in the Versailles Treaty and also quit the League of Nations. To maintain internal control, he established a secret police force which was known as the Gestapo. He said that me, Adolf Hitler, I am sent by the God to take care of a country which is made by the God, and it is divine order that I take care of this country. He also said that we Germans belong to the Aryan race and we are supposed to dominate the entire world. Was it a fact or not? It doesn't matter. Germans wanted these assurances and Hitler gave it to them. That was not it. Hitler also said that the reason for Germany's downfall in the First World War were the Jews. The Jews have to be removed, and there began the massive massacre the world has ever seen of extreme killings through concentration camps, where Jews were captured, dumped in the concentration camps by Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, also called as the Führer, which means the leader, was responsible for the beginning of the Second World War. With his effective war strategy called the Blitzkrieg, he was successful in pushing the Allied nations on the back foot. However, initially he was successful, but eventually he failed. Adolf Hitler's Germany suffered a massive defeat at the hands of the Soviets, and fearing captivity, Hitler in April 1945 withdrew himself to his bunker in Berlin. He realized now captivity is certain. But it is also believed that no man had taken birth to kill Adolf Hitler. The only man who could kill Hitler was Hitler himself. On the 30th of April 1945, Adolf Hitler swallowed a cyanide capsule, and with his pistol, he shot himself in the head. 30th April 1945, a glorious chapter of world history, because of whom, remember, history has become exciting. Adolf Hitler was dead, Germany surrendered, and the European theatre of the Second World War now had come to an end. All these dictators were gifted orators, and with their oratory skills, they could influence the minds of the people. These dictators were eventually responsible for the Second World War. That's all in this masterclass. In the next masterclass, we are going to study about the Second World War in detail. Till then, log into Z5 and follow Mind Wars.